Today we welcome to the show all the way from Maryland, intuitive life transformational healer and Reiki master, Sherri Divband. Welcome, Sherri. Nice to see you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's nice to see you as well.
Oh, thank you.
It's great to have you on.
Yeah, we're very excited, Sherri, to be interviewing you today. You do amazing interviews. We saw you on Michael J. originally, and what you were talking about really spoke to us. So we hope that today we can really inform our audience if they don't know about the kind of work that you do. We were just wondering if you could start off today by giving us your background. And you started off as a veterinarian, but then you went into working with people and in particular children. Did you want to explain a little bit about what you do?
Yeah. So I'm not a veterinarian. I'm actually a vet nurse. Okay. But so I started out working with animals. As a child, as an only child, we moved around a lot. So I really grew an affinity to animals. I really had this deep respect and love for them. And so when I was young, I wanted to be a vet. That's what I wanted to do. And I worked at a vet hospital. And when I was in high school, I was really young and I wanted to get a job at a vet to kind of learn more about veterinary medicine, to be a vet. That was my focus. And then when I was in there, I really fell in love with the nursing aspect of veterinary medicine, because in my opinion, they got to do all the fun stuff. The vet would do all the talking, and then the nurse would take the animal back and pull the blood and do all the blood work and do the x-rays and do all the treatments. And I thought, that's what I want to do. And so I fell in love with that. And so I ended up becoming a registered, we call it registered veterinary technician, but it's essentially a nurse for animals. So I did that for a long time. I worked in the intensive care unit. I worked in general practice with dogs and cats and, other little critters. And I had an obsession, as I still do, with elephants. And so I wanted to work at the zoo. Mm-hmm. So eventually I ended up working at the National Zoo in DC for almost just about a decade, doing different things, but mostly in the hospital, working with large animals. So I learned Reiki originally because I wanted to help animals heal, because in my ICU years, I saw animals in really rough shape, as you can imagine, coming out of surgery and traumas, really sick animals. And I felt like there was a better way, or not that there was a better way, because it was incredible medicine, but I thought that there was more we could do for them. And so I learned Reiki, and I did animal Reiki for many years. I never had an interest in working with people. I actually thought growing up, people were mean and they put a bad taste in my mouth. Girls were mean to me growing up, and I didn't have a lot of friends. The animals were my friends. And so I didn't want to work with people, never thought about it. And it wasn't until I started having my own kids that I was like, wow, people need this type of healing not more than the animals do, but just as much as. And so I started opening myself up to the idea of helping people. So I started with like friends and family, and it was well received. And it was actually kind of nice because I could have a conversation and receive feedback as I was doing the healing. Whereas I could communicate with animals to some extent, but it's different when you're having a conversation with someone as you're doing the healing, where they can tell you exactly how it feels and the emotions that they're feeling and sensations they're feeling. And I quite enjoyed it. And so I decided to really put myself out there, and I started working with people. And through that, my intuition grew. I don't have one of those stories where I was a psychic child that talked to angels and guides. I wish I was, but I don't want to put that facade out there, because that wasn't me. But as I grew more intuitive and more open and I became more connected, and my children opened me up. Each child that I had more of a spiritual awakening. I started to get messages in the sessions that I did with people. I started seeing past lives. I started communicating with their guides, and angels would just pop in the session and start talking to me. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And I wasn't sure. I talk about this in my book. In the beginning of the first book I wrote, how I was afraid to tell people about it initially. So they would come to me for a Reiki session, right? And I would do the Reiki, and I was seeing their past life. So I was getting it, their guides would come through, or perhaps their past loved one. And I was like, I don't want to tell these people that. They're going to think I'm nuts, because they didn't come to me for that. So I slowly started, I don't know if I've talked about this publicly, actually. I slowly started telling people just little tidbits to see, like, how are they going to react? And they wanted to hear more. And I was like, oh, wow, they really want to hear this. So that I started telling more and more people. And then I became known for it. So now everybody wanted to come see Sherri to get an intuitive reading. And now I had to tell people, hey, listen, I'm not a psychic. I don't, I don't do readings per se. I do healing, and I can't control the information that comes through. So I really was concerned because I didn't want to become known for that. Because what if someone expects it? What happens if I lose it, right? Or what happens if I can't get any information for them? And how embarrassing would that be, right? So I had to work through all of those things within myself as I grew as a healer and as an intuitive. And now my sessions are just night and day different. But my road kind of getting, or my path to where I am now, was just so beautifully kind of put together as divinely orchestrated, as I grew. So that was really cool.
Yeah, oh, that's
I love that
story.
Yeah. and good. You're so honest with that delivery of that as well. We haven't all had, necessarily, the perfect sort of school life and upbringing or whatever it might be. Different people around the world are experiencing or have experienced different, phases through their life. And I think it's amazing to where you come to now, just the growth and, your childhood, and then the whole animal thing. And you're still obviously very much into animals as well. I love that as well, and that you progressed into helping people. So that's amazing. And you've actually published 2 books, Sherri. You're on your 3rd now. I believe you're writing the 3rd.
I am.
Yeah.
I am writing the 3rd. I put my foot in my mouth on Michael Jaco's interview, and I said I was halfway done. And I have to be honest, because I got so busy, I haven't worked on it at all since that interview. And now I'm like, oh, now people are expecting it to come out, and I have so much more to write. But it will come out when it's needed the most. And this one is really more about healing. And I really want to teach people how to heal themselves. And, am I teaching something that no one else has taught before? Is my book, something new? Probably not, but it is my perspective on things and my method of healing. And, over the years, I've kind of learned different techniques through classes I've taken, but really mostly through my sessions. I learn every day. I'm so blessed because every single session that I have, whether it's a child, or an adult, their guides and their own healing team and their angels teach me so much that it helps me help the next person, because it adds to my kind of list of things that I'm able to do, or my tools that I use. And so I finally got to a point where I feel ready to kind of put myself out there and my methods out there to teach people how to do literally exactly what I do in a session with somebody. I'm writing kind of a manual, a to-do or something like that, as to, okay, this is step by step what I do for different things. So I really hope that, I know humanity's ready for it. I think people are really who are waking up, are really looking for how to heal themselves. And I think everybody watching this, everybody has the ability to heal themselves. They don't need to come to someone like myself. It's nice to have coaches like myself and mentors like myself, but everybody has that life spark within them. You just have to activate it. And so my goal is to help activate that within everybody. And more importantly, the children, because the children are the ones that I really focus on now, because they should be learning this stuff in school. They should be learning this as core curriculum. Reiki should be taught alongside with math and reading, all of this. Yeah.
I mean, we look back and think, oh gosh, we'd be very different people if we had this in our upbringing, in our schooling. But this is exactly what people need now, Sherri. They need the tools, and that's been the biggest problem. I think they don't know how to help themselves. And as we are transitioning through this phase of ascension, it's a lot for people, more than certain people more than others. But yeah, it's a lot of pressure on people in so many different ways. But having these types of tools is just amazing, and I can see that you're exactly what the world is needing, and this kind of information coming out is like the perfect timing.
I was just about to say that actually. So we talk a lot about timing on things and when it's right to do things. And I know you mentioned in one of your little speeches earlier, you said you didn't know if your perspective was good enough. But the thing is, everyone's individual perspective is good enough, and you just have to have that belief in yourself. And we've talked, as I said, so much about timing, Julie and myself. Even with the way that we started our channel, we were like you, Sherri. We certainly never expected it to be putting ourselves, on the internet and talking on videos and doing this sort of thing.
In fact, we avoided that as much as possible. We didn't want to do any social media. We're very
We never did any
private
social
people,
media. Yeah.
and very sensitive as well. And Kylie doesn't like me saying that, but like we're very sensitive people. We're very empathetic people. We grew up feeling everyone's energy around us and sort of having to be, I think, the entertainers in a sense, to lift the energy and lift the mood wherever we were. It was like required of us, I suppose, or we at least felt like we had to do that. So it's difficult to manage our energy levels a lot throughout our lives. And a lot of it was quite a lonely journey in that sense, because there was literally nobody around us that seemed to think like us or feel the way we felt. And in Australia, we honestly didn't feel like there was a lot of us here. In terms of Reiki and energy healing, are you sort of working under that Reiki umbrella, or is it through your sessions you've kind of developed these different kinds of energy healing? Do you sort of give names to those, or is it just you sort of keep it under that umbrella of Reiki?
Well, that's a good question. So Reiki is I like to actually refer to it as the energy umbrella, and then Reiki is just like a sliver, you know. Reiki is such a great foundation or gateway energy healing for people to learn, because it's very simple and you can build upon it. So Reiki was what I started with, and it was what I worked with animals, you know, for a while. And then I ventured into working with people. But through, like I said, through my sessions is actually how I learned to do the rest. I didn't take any more classes outside of Reiki as far as energy healing. I did other things like shamanic healing and cord cutting and other classes. But as far as like the energy aspect of it, it transitioned or shifted more multidimensionally through my actual sessions with people. So now I work through different dimensions. I work in past lives or parallel. I like to refer to it as timelines or parallel timelines. There really is no past, present, or future, but opening up timelines and working through people, helping people work through trauma, blockages, karma, contracts, negative energy. You know, I work a lot with the samsara karmic wheel, that reincarnation wheel that many people have been trapped in. I'm working with a lot of people through that right now. I work through 3D to 4D to 5D. I can work, work with people's densities, their frequencies. You know, all of that is something that has taken me a long time to kind of add different things to what I'm able to do that I didn't start with. You know, Reiki was what I started with rather. And I kind of just built upon it as I go. You know, I tell clients that I saw 6 months ago, hey, you haven't seen me for 6 months. Let me tell you what I'm able to do now that I couldn't do 6 months ago. And they're like, really? You know, it's like every day I learned something today in several of my sessions that I never knew before. So it's like I'm constantly learning different things. And that's the great thing about our evolution. Our collective consciousness is infinite. You can never learn everything. It's not possible. And, you know, I'll share something with you guys that I haven't actually shared publicly either. I had a mentor years and years ago. And when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I was kind of teetering in between veterinary medicine, because I was very passionate about the animals. And I really felt torn because I really want to give that up? Did I want to work with people? Like really felt like I couldn't do both. I got to a point where I had to choose, right? And so I had a mentor at the time that I worked with, and I said, I feel like I'm on the cusp of something, but I don't quite understand what it is. It's not Reiki. And she explained to me that where I came from outside of Earth, that I did a mechanism of healing that she couldn't explain to me. She didn't understand what it was, but I would understand at some point. And that was like 3-4 years ago, no, 5 years ago, actually, maybe more. Gosh, time is so hard. At least 5 years ago. And now I look back and I know exactly what she meant, because she could not have understood. But now I understand perfectly what she was trying to say, and she couldn't articulate it. So it's like I said, igniting that innate ability that that everyone has within us. But perhaps my soul has just done it for such a long period of time, whereas other souls have done other things. You know, perhaps innovation, technology. You know, everybody has their like niche of things that they do that they're quote unquote experts at, you know, wherever they are. And then they come to Earth to help humanity with that particular area of expertise. So for me, I feel like it has to be, it's energy, it's healing. It's healing the body, the mind, understanding emotions, all of that. But I didn't get it until now. And, I probably, looking back, if I go into the future 5 years and I look back, my future self will say, gosh, there's no way you would have got it to my current self, right? So like we're constantly evolving in what we understand. It's that collective consciousness. It's infinite. The knowledge is so vast, which is really fun. We never stop growing.
No, that's so beautiful the way you put that, Sherri. And I think it's also like when you're ready to receive certain things, it sort of comes either sometimes it comes spontaneously, like in short moments, and other times you kind of just evolve into it. And maybe that conversation that you had with that lady sparked something off in you, and then it just evolved in you during those last 3 or 4 years to get to this point. So I just love the way you said that. So
thank you.
Do you feel, Sherri, that time is moving a lot faster? Do you think, because you didn't realise it had been 5 years? We always say, oh my gosh, time is moving faster. I think it really, really is. All this light that's coming onto the earth right now. Would you agree? Like, things just flying by.
Absolutely. And there's the timelines are shifting, and they're also speeding up, and there's a reason for it. There really is. And I've been guided multiple times by multiple different sources, meaning spirit and angels and different guides that I've worked with through my sessions, that it is in fact speeding up. And the higher frequency we go, time is an illusion. Anyways, we all understand that it's a 3D construct. It's this matrix of Earth that was created. But if you take the time element out of it, it could be as fast or as slow as we perceive it. It's all about perception. But collectively, I believe that we all are feeling it as much faster than it has historically. And I think that's for a reason, because we need to get moving and get through this ascension much more quickly so that we can finish this evolutionary process.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to touch on this a little bit later in the conversation, but we were talking about ascension just now. We know that people are experiencing ascension symptoms. Can you maybe sort of explain what some of the main symptoms are, and maybe how people can manage these in the process, right now?
Oh, yeah. They're hard. Yeah, I'm experiencing them as well. So let me explain first why you have the ascension symptoms or what's happening. So it's all about our vibration or our frequency. So outside of this time and space, a lot of us, our vibrational frequency or our density is much higher. So right now, in this exact moment, in this timeline on Earth, we are shifting into a higher density and a higher frequency. And so our physical bodies are also raising in that vibration. And so our physical bodies react to our vibrational frequency. And if the shifts are too quick, too fast, which historically they've been really slow, but right now, like because of the time element, like we just said, things are, the frequency is going up way fast. And so our physical bodies are having a difficult time adapting to that frequency shift. Whereas like the New Earth children, I do readings with these children that are their frequency is like over 800 hertz. It's insane how high it is. Whereas let's say majority of people walking around are in the low 400s. So you could see the vast difference. So these children they're already high frequency, high vibrating. So their bodies are adapting a little bit better. They have challenges. But for us, as the adults who are trying to navigate into a higher density and a higher frequency, our physical bodies are like, whoa, wait, hold on a second. I have to adapt to this. I have to rebalance, recalibrate everything, because everything is energy. And so the physical response of that is headaches, dizziness, ringing in the ears, forgetfulness, fatigue, vivid dreams, stomach aches, diarrhea, all minor aches and pains in the joints. I mean, the list is infinite, but the good thing is it's temporary and it's not long term. Heart palpitations, so those people watching this, don't hear the symptoms I'm thinking and then say, oh, I don't need to go to the doctor now, because of course you want to check yourself out, but it's likely that it is an ascension symptom, or people refer to it as the Ascension Flu. And all it is our physical bodies are adjusting to our new frequency, which is a beautiful thing, because that's what the ascension is about. We are going into a higher frequency. So our bodies have to kind of catch up and meet us there and adapt.
Yeah. That makes sense. we've both definitely experienced a few of those symptoms for sure. I've had ringing ears for a lot, and I've had them a lot in the past couple of days actually. Certain times of the day I'm noticing of late, so it changes around. There's a lot of different sort of phases that I've gone through.
We've
for
both
sure.
struggled with sore stomachs and
a lot of stomach
issues,
things,
yeah,
like abnormal to what we would have had
a few years ago. Yeah.
So yeah.
And we're only 1 year apart, so we sort of seem to experience the same kind of symptoms.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it makes it doubly bad, doesn't it? Because there's two of us. Yeah, I guess, look, it's just, as you said, it's just this process we're going through. We just have to manage as best we can. And we always advocate to people to do the things that you like to do that help raise your vibration. Get outside in nature, go for walks. Obviously, exercise is really good for the two of us. We like to do that. Other people, I'm sure, have plenty of other things. So I suppose you would definitely advocate that as well, like raise your vibration however you can, whether it's music or nature, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Drinking water, laughter, joy, all the things. Hug an animal, be with your kids, be with your family, do things that bring you joy, go outside, be in nature, all of the things. Those are the things that are going to help you get through it faster or easier. Everybody's body is different. Just because you're not experiencing these symptoms does not mean that you're not ascending. So I want to be clear about that to people who are saying, well, I'm not having anything, I must not be ascending. And that's just not true. It just means that your body either adapts really well, or you are just one of the lucky ones where you're not experiencing anything physical. So pay attention to your emotional well-being, pay attention to your thoughts, pay attention to what you're attracting into your life. So there's a lot of other things that can contribute to an ascension, not necessarily all physical. So I just want to make sure people understand that as well.
And how much longer do you think people might be experiencing these kinds of symptoms in your sort of estimation, I suppose?
I feel like we still have waves to go, I think that it's purposeful that it comes in shifts and waves like this, because if everybody just woke up one morning and their frequency was several hundred, degrees or points or however you say that higher, we'd be out of sorts and people would probably go a little bit nutty. People already are going nutty, but spiritually nutty. And they wouldn't understand it. And, a lot of people that come to me are experiencing all these things and they didn't even know there was such a thing as ascension symptoms. So it's helpful when I explain it to them, or they're watching a podcast or an interview and someone talks about it. They're like, oh, that is me, so I think it's purposeful, but I feel like we have at least another year to go. And that's by design, but it's going to be different for everybody. And, a year from now, most of us could be done, but then those that woke up later than us are still trying to catch up. And so it's all done in divine timing for the individuals that are watching this and that are all over the world. So I would say at least a year, but I also, Michael Jaco asked me about this, and I think it has to tie into the divine children and the new earth children. But I feel like a lot of shifts are going to continue through 2023. So perhaps we get through the thick of it within the next year, but then there are still, like, there's an earthquake and then the aftershocks, so it could continue for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But it's all speculation. I don't know for sure.
Yeah. In terms of ascension, if people sort of want to, I don't even think I've asked this question before, but if people wanted to gauge their ascension and their level of vibration, what would they be sort of having to look out for if they are ascending? Is it that they can deal with things better emotionally? Is that probably one of the best ways to gauge things? Like you're just a bit more, I guess, neutral in your approach, or you don't have these emotional ups and downs as much as you did previously? Is that a good starting point?
Yeah, that's a very good gauge. I get that question a lot. And, when you're in a higher frequency, or let's say 5D, which we all have been talking about, and the earth being into the fifth dimension, things like that, our array of emotional responses shift. So, you could still get angry, but if everybody watching this right now thinks about the time that they were the most angry in their life, just take a moment to think about that and what it felt like. Everybody can think about that real quickly. Now think about a time where you were upset about something, but not like enraged. So you guys can kind of gauge the two, right? So think about it in being a third density field and a fifth density field, or third density being and a fifth density being. And if you're in a fifth density state, you will likely experience the upset emotion as opposed to the rage emotion that you would have felt in 3D. So I think there's a huge misconception that when we get to 5D, everybody's going to be like super happy all the time and no one's going to cry and no one's going to be sad and there's no hardships. That's not the case, because we're still living beings, we're still experiencing, but the severity of the emotions should shift so that you are angry, but you're able to transmute that anger much faster, much easier, without a lot of effort. Right. So we're not holding on to that energy of anger, sadness, worry, all of those things. So for those people watching, a good gauge would be, it's okay to get angry, but how long are you angry for? I did a reading with somebody the other day and he said, I feel like I'm ascending, but I went to dinner the other night and the waitress was really rude and she made me so upset. I think I'm still in 3D. And I said, well, hold on a second. I was like, so you got really upset at her. Did you yell at her? No. Were you rude to her? No. When you got home, were you still mad about it? Did you get into a fight with your wife? No. Okay, so you experienced anger in the moment. You're allowed to, you're human, but then you didn't let it escalate into anything else. That is exactly what I'm talking about when you're transitioning into 5D, is you're able to experience an emotion, but then you let it go. Had you got home, fought with your wife, had road rage on the way home, yelling at everybody, woke up and you're still angry, that is 3D. So like it's all about how we're handling experiences, processing our emotions, how we respond to events, news, if people shouldn't be watching the news anymore, but if you are, or just things that you're disappointed that didn't happen, it's about just letting go and being more at peace with how things are in the moment, and just focusing your attention inward and on your own healing, and not worrying about everybody else and what they're doing. So it's your way of life. It's your way of thinking. It's the way you process emotions. All of those things will determine where your vibration is. You don't have to know the exact number or the number of your frequency or anything like that. That's fun to know, and it's something that I could tell you, but really, does it matter? Not necessarily, because it could change the next day. Do you know what I'm saying? Based on whatever you're doing. So it's really more about recognizing the signs of what your vibration is and what you're attracting into your life. So those are the best ways to kind of gauge where you are in your own evolution, which is what everyone should be focusing on right now. Is that if everybody just focused on their own vibration, their own healing, forgiveness, letting go, relaxing, taking deep breaths, just relaxing and focusing inward, I promise you this ascension timeline would speed up so fast that it would be over before we know it. But there are people who just won't do it. They're just not ready to do it yet. And so that is what's taking up a lot of the time, is people aren't ready for it yet.
That's right. And I think for the people that are, they're feeling impatient. So, I feel like the audience probably would have loved that answer. So I hope that they are just going to
hopefully that helped.
Focus and just find that level of patience as we move through this. I know Carly had a question about the transition between 3D to 4D to 5D, because not a lot of people talk about 4D and 5D is thrown around so much. So I just wanted to clear that up for people about what 5D actually is. So thank you, Sherri.
Yes.
Did you want to ask about 4D?
I will, and I just wanted to touch on a point you were just saying, Sherri, about gauging where you're at. And Julie and I work together now. I mean, this is something that's new for us. We haven't been doing this for very long in our lives, and I don't think we would have been able to do this previously in our lives. I think, as being sisters, of course, I don't know if you have any siblings, Sherri, or not, but I know you've got kids of your own. Of course, you're going to argue. You spend a lot of time in each other's space. Of course, there's going to be those moments where you disagree on things and that sort of thing. And whilst we still have those moments, we're actually getting over those moments a lot quicker these days. And we have been spending a great deal of time together working on our projects at the moment, which we never anticipated to happen. And here we are doing this, and we're getting through it. We're managing our way through it. We're not having those silly, arguments. And I know people think, oh, well, you only argue or fight when you're a child, but that's not true. If you spend a lot of time in someone's space, of course you might get on each other's, bad side. Yeah. I just want to make that point that we've actually experienced it ourselves, so we can gauge that, I guess, on how quickly we turn around with each other and, okay, I understand where you're coming from and that sort of thing. So I guess, people out there probably have their own examples of things like that. So it's important to be aware of that. And as you said, I think another good piece of advice was take a moment, breathe. We hear this phrase a lot, but people don't probably actually stop to do that. So it's so important. Breathing is such an important thing, especially if there's a case. Sorry, just diverted there. I do want to ask you a little bit about this phase of 4D. So we hear a lot, as Julia said, we hear a lot about 3D and that transition to 5D, and we hear a lot about 5D and how things, I guess, should be, or how we think we should be feeling in that phase. And you've also cleared that up. What about this 4D phase? What would people be experiencing if they were in 4D? And is it a quick transition from 4D to 5D, or is it longer from 3D to 4D? Does that make sense? It's kind of hard to get your head around, isn't it?
It does. Well, and that's I think that's an individual, individual healing journey for everybody. It's different. So 3D are really the people who are still asleep. They're not spiritual. They don't believe in anything outside of this space. They're completely closed off. Their crown and third eyes are completely shut. They don't have any belief system. They're tapped into the matrix. So we all understand what 3D is. So 4D is really about opening yourself up and waking up and searching within yourself to find knowledge, whether it's through these podcasts or reading books or people who, a lot of the people who reach out to me, especially now more than ever, who email me. I've been awake 2 weeks. I've been awake since yesterday. I woke up early this year. Those are the people who in 4D are like, hey, I recognize that I'm waking up. I want to know more. What can I do? It's like, it really is the healing phase, because once you go into 5D, are you healed completely? No, we're never healed completely, but we are in a different mind space. So 4D is about action. It's that space where you're ready to heal, where you're ready to forgive, where you're ready to reflect, where you're ready to admit that you're not perfect, that you are wrong, that you've hurt people, that you have compassion for other people, you have empathy for other people. So it's that space in between 3D to 5D where you're really just healing and growing and learning about yourself, learning about others. And it's an important step. You can't skip it. You can't skip it. And that's the thing, I have been teaching for over a decade, Reiki and intuitive development, all of these things. And what I always tell people is it's so easy to be negative and to allow yourself to live within the matrix. It's so easy because you just follow the person in front of you. It takes no effort. You can remain angry for as long as you want without any effort whatsoever. To pull yourself to a higher frequency takes work, and it's work that people don't want to do. They don't, because it's uncomfortable, and you cry a lot, and you don't like it, and it's icky, and it doesn't feel good, and then I got to talk to somebody that I wronged and right my wrongs. And so 4D is about all of that work. It's the work that we have to do in order to get to 5D, and it's not fun. It really isn't, but I encourage everybody to just dive in, because it is worth it on the other end. It really is. But it takes effort, and it has to become part of your routine. Just like we brush our teeth every day. I hope everyone that's watching is brushing their teeth every day, or we take our vitamins, or whatever we do is part of our routine. Breathing, our heartbeats. It has to become part of our routine. That's all about what mindfulness is being mindful about your thoughts and your healing and making it a priority. And that's 4D, making your healing and your spiritual journey a priority, so that when you get into 5D, you can truly embrace it because you're ready for it. You put in the time and the work. Hopefully that makes sense.
Oh, it does. And we say in our videos a lot, do the work, do the work.
I was just about to say that's Julie's favourite two ways, do the work and mindfulness. She says that so much.
No, but it's so true, Sherri. You have to have that level of commitment, and you have to do it every day. I mean, you might skip a day here and there because you're just really worn out.
But that's okay too. But that's okay. You just need to be okay.
It's just being consistent and doing that and putting that effort in for yourself. So, you will get there. It just takes that level of commitment to do it. So thank you.
Yeah.
We wanted to dive in a little bit deeper. Well, deep. Haven't started yet, but on these star seeds.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if I'm saying this is exactly the right way, but is it that star seeds are the new Earth children, but there are lots of different categories of star seeds, and a lot of them came onto the earth many decades ago as indigos. Was that the first group? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, you're saying indigo is right, but no, they're not the first to come on. I don't know when the first ones came on. I think for, thousands and thousands and thousands of years, since the earth put out that SOS that she needed help, because of all the negativity and all the infiltration by dark forces, whatever you want to call them, we started having volunteers come in. I didn't, that's not my term, Dolores. I talk about Dolores Cannon in my book, and in a lot of my videos, she talks about different waves of volunteers that have come to the earth from other places, which we refer to as starseeds, but there are a lot of different names for it. She called them volunteers that came here to help humanity in some way, to help with spreading their light or raising the vibration, whatever you want to call it. And so the history is that humanity wasn't ready for a lot of the first waivers, or even who came before the first waivers of volunteers, because I've done so many past life regressions with people who were burned at the stake, or who were killed or murdered for their contribution, what they came here to do, to help heal people, or contribute in a positive way for whatever it was that they were doing, because we weren't ready yet. I say we, but humanity, people of earth, were not ready for it yet. So we kept pushing the timelines back because people weren't ready, and we kept bringing in these beautiful volunteers, and they weren't successful because the time and space wasn't ready, or they came here and it was so contrast to what they were used to from where they were from. There was no war and there was no fear and all of this where they came from. So they were completely fish out of water and almost catatonic. That was weird. So we just put the lights on.
Oh, that's interesting.
So anyways, that was super creepy that came on. Okay, let me get, okay. So sorry about that. So these beautiful souls kept coming in saying, okay, I'm going to contribute. But then they got here and they became hermits. They became depressed. They were also called, different things like schizophrenic, bipolar. They committed suicide. They were hospitalized. So, it wasn't really working out for a lot of these beautiful souls that were so advanced in consciousness. But Earth was just not a space and time for them just yet. So we've had these beautiful starseeds coming in for, as far back as time on Earth. But I would say that the group that I work with the most are the New Earth children. Actually, before we get to New Earth children, the indigos. So the indigos started coming in around the 70s. And well, actually the first wave of indigos were the, what do we call them? The ones in the 70s, I'm blanking on the name. Like the hippie generation, but they were a little bit too far, like love everything, because then they got into drugs and then they kind of lost their focus, and they were beautiful people, but it kind of went in the wrong direction. So the second wave of indigos, which came, more so in the late 70s, well, were born in the 70s and then 80s and 90s were the second wave that were a little bit more focused. So I'm an indigo. So, we're very independent. We're very focused, but we're super sensitive. We're kind. We're compassionate. We're empathetic. We're not competitive. We don't, we don't like conflict. So we had our qualities shifted a little bit, right? So that's the indigos, and a lot of indigos are parents now to the New Earth children, which is a beautiful thing, because we're prepared to bring these children in because of our spirituality and things like that. So the New Earth children, depending on where they come from and kind of what they're here to do, I have identified or placed them into categories based off of their characteristics. And this has gotten me into a little bit of trouble in past interviews, because I've had people say all children are special. And yes, I'm not saying any are more special than the other. I'm just trying to place them into categories for parents to recognize, okay, why my child is super sensitive, or why my child is the way they are, because they fit into this specific characteristic or this category. And why? Because this category is meant to do this particular thing. So it helps them understand their children better. No child is better than any other child. No person is more evolved than any other person. when you take them outside of this time and space, but it's just a nice identifying kind of factor for us as society to understand them better, to parent them better, but also for those adolescents and young adults to understand themselves better. Because when I break down some of the categories, I have these, 20-something-year-old women and men like breaking down, crying in my office because they're like, no one has ever understood me the way you just described. That is exactly me. And thanking me. And it's really about them understanding why am I so different than other people? Why do I react this way to certain things? And it's all for a reason. It's for a greater purpose. And so that's what the New Earth children are really, how they differ from previous indigos and volunteers, as Dolores Cannon refers to them as.
Sorry, just to be clear, so indigos, they were born into the late 70s through the 80s and 90s. But it's not all children that were born during that time, right? So it's not like everyone had the opportunity to be an indigo. It's specific children that were born with this.
Yeah.
I don't want to say label because it's not a label, but as this type of soul.
Yes, that is correct. So the indigos, not everybody's an indigo, just like not every single child is going to fit within any of the categories. And that is because those children or those souls have been on Earth for such a long period of time that they don't really fit in the category. They're the ones that we're coming here to try to rescue out of the third density because they've become trapped in it, not because they've done anything wrong. It's just that they were in that karmic wheel of reincarnation, let's say. And so the star seeds come in to help raise consciousness and kind of not rescue, because we're not really here to be rescued, but help us raise the frequency so that we can get out of it. So not everyone is an indigo that's born between that time period.
Okay. And obviously indigos, you're probably going to say this, but I was going to talk about, obviously indigos, of all the star seeds, they have probably the most past lives. Would you say that? Is that how it works?
The way you described past life before, Sherri, was like different timelines, which I've never heard of before, actually.
Yeah,
so
I wrote that down.
Interesting.
Parallel timelines, yeah.
Yeah, do they have the most, I guess, energetic karma to deal with?
No, that's a good question. I don't necessarily think that's the case.
Okay.
I think that they can have a lot of past lives, but I really feel like it's the ones that have been here in the karmic wheel of reincarnation that could have 50, 60, 70, 100 lives that are the ones working through the most trauma and the most karma. And the indigos come in and they may have only had 10 to 20 to maybe even 30 lives. So they're way less than the others that are not starseeds coming in on a rescue mission to help humanity evolve. Now, the New Earth children, I would say closer to 75% of the ones I've worked with, born after 2010, let's say, are on their first life. They are the largest group coming in, and this is their first time on Earth, which is why so many are struggling, which is why so many are labeled with autism and Asperger's and ADHD and all of the things that really, really get me going, because it's absolutely absurd in my opinion. And it's identifying or labeling the characteristics that these children are that just don't fit the norms of Earth, but that's why they're here, to change the norms of Earth. And so they have less life. So they're not working through karma. They're not working through blockages like a lot of adults are. So they're different in that regard. So hopefully that makes sense.
It does. And Carly and I both consider ourselves indigos. I read a book probably more than 15 years ago, and it was an indigo book, and it really resonated with exactly who we are. And I remember my mum taking me to healers. I had my first awakening when I was 11, and she took me to many healers and different psychics and different people, to help the process for me, because I struggled, and Carly did as well, but I probably struggled a little bit more than she did. I just didn't understand why people, like you said, were so mean and why things were the way they were. I just did not get it. Like, I didn't understand why there was just so much turmoil and just meanness on Earth. We understand like the labeling that people have with the ADHD and Asperger's and autism.
With those kids, obviously they have been given labels, but do they all fall under the starseed umbrella? Is every child that is classified as having, say, ADHD or autism or Asperger's, are they all definitely starseeds? Is that why they're experiencing the ways that they are, behaving the ways that they do?
That's a good question. I can't say with certainty that 100% are, but I will say that most are. That is the case for most of them. And it's because they have not had a lot of lives here. Their vibration or their frequency is so high that they can't merge with this physical body. It's really difficult for them. And so they have challenges depending on if they end up if they're more right-brained or left-brained, their challenges are different, and how they integrate with other children or just kind of humanity in general, they struggle a lot. So in my experience, I will just say that most of the people that I've ever worked with have had less than 5 lives that are autistic or has Asperger's. ADHD might not be that statistic might be a little bit different. I think that hyperactivity is a vibrational thing, but it also has to do with the food that we eat, the electromagnetic frequencies that we are exposed to, just a lot of other environmental factors that are by design by negative forces to inhibit our light. And so in that case, I would say that it's a mix, and it's more environmental reactions as opposed to the Asperger's and autism. But that's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think these children going forward, with the way that the world is ascending and the people within it, do you think that these kids will continue to experience those symptoms, the way that they behave? Is there a chance that they actually, in a sense, might be healed from some of those symptoms they're experiencing from being on Earth and not, I guess, being able to adjust to the things that are on Earth? Because that's really what it is, isn't it? They're struggling, as you said, they're struggling to sort of fit in with this space. Do you see that being different for these kids going forward? Or even adults?
Yeah, so that.
Oh. Mm.
Yeah, and there are 2 ways I can answer that, or two different directions I can go. So physically, I believe that they will adapt, and a lot of them just takes time. So they need to be on the earth longer and go through maturity, and certain things have to occur in order for them to physically adapt. That being said, the way they act or their personalities or their thinking, things like that, probably will not shift. And more are going to come in thinking that way for a reason, so that we change old paradigms and break them down into new ones. I'll give you guys, I feel like this is the show of exposing. This is the first time. This is a very recent session I did with a young soul. And I was blown away by what she told me, because I didn't think about this at all. So I've spent years helping parents, especially with, let's say, children that are autistic who are nonverbal. So I've been told repeatedly by these beautiful souls, I don't speak where I come from. So I don't know why I need to speak here. We're telepathic. We don't use vocal cords. I mean, they may make clicking sounds or tones, but they don't speak in the way we do. And they get really frustrated because they don't want to speak. They don't like it, and they refuse outright to do it. They absolutely can. They just choose not to. They don't want to. Mm-hmm. And so I have repeatedly convinced as much as I can to these souls, to their higher self, listen, I understand, but you chose to have a journey here on Earth to contribute in a beautiful, most powerful way. And because we're on Earth, we speak here, and is there something we can do to convince you to try talking? Because this is how things work here. And although you don't do it back home, you are in an earth body, and this is how things are done here. So can we work something out where you do speak so that people understand you, right? So I'm like convincing them, like, I understand, but Yeah. So I was blown away because I had a session recently, and same thing. This girl's nonverbal. And she was verbal until like 2, and then all of a sudden stopped and has not been verbal since. And I think she's like 5 now. Okay. So this beautiful soul was so advanced in consciousness. I channeled her. That's how I speak with them telepathically, and I channeled a message. I felt like, oh my gosh, this girl is so far beyond my consciousness that I was just like, so first of all, so honored to speak with her. But what she was saying, she was blowing my mind with her intelligence and how she was speaking with me. And what she said to me is, listen, you need to stop convincing us to speak as you do, or walk like you do, or do this like you do, when actually we're here to teach you, because Earth is going to transition. And by 2030, she actually gave me a date. By 2030, we will start. I couldn't tell if she was saying we were going to start or that was a significant date, but we will begin telepathically communicating on Earth, where we are moving into a time and space where we will not have verbal communication anymore. Earth is going to stop. Human beings will no longer do that. Now, that may take till 2050 to completely come to fruition. But what she was telling me is I need to stop convincing them, because in actuality, they're here to teach us what we're supposed to do. And what that means is we're supposed to connect to our intuition, practice connecting energetically, speak to each other telepathically, all the things that we already have done and we already know how to do. And the Atlanteans were doing it, and many people do it now and they don't realize it. And you know, a lot of these autistic children speak just fine telepathically with their moms. Their moms are like, I know, understand everything that she or he wants me to do, because they have that connection. So she was telling me that we are going to go into a time and space where that is how we communicate. And I was like, get out of here. Really? And so that was just mind-blowing to me, because I was like, wow, you know, I don't know if other parents are going to be excited when I tell them that their nonverbal autistic child is telling them that they're never going to speak. But perhaps we could come to some sort of like, you know, middle ground where, you know, but that was completely, I did not expect that. I did not know that. Now, other people listening to this may be like, oh, I've heard that before. I didn't know that. So that was really interesting to me, because it makes perfect sense. And 2030, you know, that's not that far away.
What an incredible story. I got goosebumps the whole time you were saying it. I did used to feel that people could pick up my energy, and I used to go around thinking, oh, that person knows what I'm thinking because they can read my energy and I can read theirs. So I don't really have to say anything to them because I know that's happening. And I got myself into trouble a lot of times for that because people didn't understand that. And I didn't realize people didn't. I have felt that speaking can a lot of the time be unnecessary if you are actually tuned into energy. And what that little girl told you really makes perfect sense to me, because we are moving to a time where people should and will be able to understand people on an energetic level if they're completely tapped into themselves and soul's mission. So that really makes sense to me, and sometimes words are just a bit of a waste. So sometimes I say to Carly, oh, I don't know if we need to really talk about this because it's just a bit of a waste. People already know, but
I've always had the motto of think before you speak. So I always take a moment sometimes before I speak out what I'm really thinking. So that's something that I've learnt, I guess, over time. Though it does take time to get to these points in life, and I'm sure you agree with that, Sherri. I was just thinking, I was actually feeling quite emotional when you were telling that story. So I can only just imagine what the parents of that child must have felt, and the parents of all of these children, and also adults that you speak to as well. There must just be this like, oh my gosh, I'm just so overwhelmed that I've found someone like yourself that can actually, well, we're saying speak about it, but actually communicate about this and really understand it. And it makes so much sense. And
I can imagine people would feel so lucky to be able to communicate with you. Like they would probably feel just so blessed when they get to meet you and speak to you on this level. So yeah, they're very lucky.
Yeah, thank you.
We just wanted to touch on these children and also adults that you speak to. Do they talk about angels and guides? Well, when we say talk, do they communicate to you about their angels and guides? And what do you know the form that they sort of come in, these angels and guides, and also to you, because you said that you channel their guides to give you messages. Is there a way that you can communicate that to us, like how you receive that? Is that something you could explain, or is that too personal or too difficult?
No, I love angels. Actually, I had a session today, and the angel's energy was just so magnificent that I just didn't want her to leave, because it feels like the most embraceful, like loving, compassionate energy that there are no words really to express it. But but how they appear. So to me, how I've seen them is a variety. I've literally seen a 10-foot angel with like a dress, and their hair is beautiful and flowing. Some of them have jewelry on, and some of them are very much in form. And then others like are very like blurry in form, but then they have the wings. And then others come to me literally as light. So I'll see hues. So I'll see pink and white, or I'll see purple, or I'll see a light blue. So sometimes they'll come in orbs. So they come in very different forms. They're not always in a physical form or a form that we would identify as an angel, because I think that, again, that's an earth construct of how we actually see them. And children, how they've described them to me, have described them in similar ways, which was cool, because without me having to say, they'll say, oh, I saw pink hue, or they don't use the word hue, but they'll say, I saw pink light in my room, and it was floating around, and it made me feel happy, or made me feel safe. But then they've also said, I saw, they'll describe like Archangel Michael to a T without ever knowing who Archangel Michael was. And I'll say, oh, that's Archangel Michael. And so there are different forms, but their energy is always the same, to me at least. It's loving, kind, almost overwhelming. Like it's almost like the most beautiful euphoria that you've ever felt, where you just feel like you're on some high, but like nothing you've ever experienced. And almost it's overwhelming. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a beautiful energy that's almost overwhelming. And then when it's gone, it's gone. Like there's no in between. It's like there and it's gone. So, and they communicate, most of the time they don't come to me with any names. It's the energy signature, but they have the most beautiful messages for the clients that I work with, or the children that they're guarding, things like that. And so, I guess it just varies. It just varies. It's harder to communicate with angels, because their frequency. So when I taught intuitive development, this is how I would teach people. I'd say animals and past loved ones that are closely earthbound, that crossed over, but that are still pretty close to our dimension, are able to lower their vibration significantly to meet us. So that it's easy to communicate with animals telepathically, or past loved ones, the easiest. Then we have spirit guides that are, each one of us have a spirit guide that is a soul that is not incarnated in a physical form. And they can meet us to a certain extent. They can meet us, but we have to try to meet them at some point. Maybe not halfway, but we have to raise our frequency enough, and they bring theirs down so that we can have a meeting point and we can communicate with them. The higher we go, the easier we can communicate with them. The lower they have to go, the harder it is for them to communicate. That's why they give signs, or they'll play with the lights, or they'll figure a way to get into a message to you. Angels, on the other hand, are so high frequency that they cannot bring themselves down to our level. So we have to be able to raise our frequency up really high to meet their level. They're not coming down, and not because they're too good or they don't want to. They just can't. It's not about that. And then archangels on top of that are even higher, and it's even harder to communicate with them, because you have to be in a place where you can bring yourself way up, like the highest almost that you could really get in order to communicate with them. And because because New Earth children, or just children in general, I feel like no matter who they are, all children, because they're so connected to source, the veil is very thin. They see everything. They see into dimensions, even though they don't understand it. Even if they don't tell anybody, they can see it. The angels can show themselves easily, or it's not that they're showing themselves, that the kids can see into the dimension they're in. Does that make sense? So it's easy for them. It's effortless. They're not even trying. Whereas someone like myself, like I have to try. I've had to try for many years. Now I'm at the point now where, and this is nowhere from ego, I know how to do it now, so I can do it easily. But if there are some days that I struggle, and I know it has to do with my vibration. I just can't connect today. Maybe I ate too much meat the day before, or I'm just too earthbound. It depends on. There's a lot of factors that contribute. So I don't know if I answered the question, because I think I went off on a tangent, but.
That is probably the best explanation I've heard.
Yes.
Okay, so we touched on the indigos, and then the other categories of the New Earth children are rainbow, crystal, star. That they're the three other categories. And then you talked about the divine children, which we wanted to touch on because we don't have enough time to talk about all the other categories. But they are all here with a certain soul purpose as well. But the divine children you mentioned are born between 2019 and 2023. You said they're like the ascended masters, they're the anchors of this new earth. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. So they're like a little spiritual army, you know. When I first saw them, and I first channeled them back in, I really don't know when it was, end of 2017, maybe? I'm not sure. I visualized them literally as an army coming, but when I looked at them closely, they were children, and they had a halo of white light around them, and it was like an army, but like a spiritual army. And I was like, whoa, who are these kids? Like, this is incredible, right? And they all were interconnected like a web. And the reason for that is that they are all ascended masters. They're earth angels, which, you know, I didn't even believe, if you asked me a decade ago, that angels could incarnate in a physical form, because I read in books that wasn't possible. So that's, you know, in my mind, that wasn't a thing. My opinion has changed since the 144,000 and other things that I could talk to you guys privately, but I don't talk about publicly. But that it is in fact possible, and they are in fact coming in to assist us into anchoring us into 5D and to really just blast the earth with light. So they are the light warriors, and the veil is thin, or not even thin. there is no veil with these children. They are Christ consciousness. They're ascended masters. They're earth angels. They are the highest, like in evolutionary, you know, in the evolutionary spectrum. I don't want to say the highest because I don't actually know that, but they are very high advanced, highly evolved souls that are coming here, and they're interconnected. They're all over. They're going to be born all over the world, both male, female, in all star signs, in all corners of the earth, all warriors, all connected. So they can't be infiltrated by darkness, because you'd have to take all of them down. You know, like each one of us could potentially be vulnerable at any aspect of, or any time in our life by darkness, entity attachments, those types of things, because we are weaker when our vibration is low and by ourselves. And that has historically been the problem, not the problem, but a difficult thing for starseeds, is that we are very attractive to dark entities, because they know, oh, that's a light worker. Let me do anything I can to bring them down, infiltrate them in any way that I can. And so they had to figure out a way, okay, how can we make sure that these children don't fail? And they figured out how to do that is to connect them all, so that you'd have to take down every single one of them in order to infiltrate one. Does that make sense? So they're all connected. They're all telepathic with each other. They all can experience, you know, like that. I don't know if you guys saw the movie Avatar, where that main beautiful tree, everything was connected, and all the roots, they could feel each other, speak to each other. That's how the divine children are. They can connect. They can speak to each other. They can experience things that are happening on the other side of the world. Like they're just absolutely incredible. And they are psychic. They're healers, instant healers. They could touch somebody and heal them of any illness. I mean, I don't even know what to say about them. There's so many things we could talk about. They're here to anchor us into 5D. Like there's so many other people before them, and amazing children, amazing adults, and our ancestors that have all done their jobs, and they've all contributed. And these guys just come in. They're like the caboose of the train. You know what I mean? They come in the end, and they just anchor us in so that we are not moving out of it. That's the best way I could describe them.
It's so beautiful. My goodness. And you describe them also as having this super consciousness, like you said, so they can telepathically connect with each other all over the world, and that it's impossible for them to have these entity attachments because their frequency is so high. So even in just that awareness of knowing that these children are coming onto the earth, it should be a good signal for people to understand that, well, if I raise my vibration, less entity attachments, you know, I'm going to be able to do so much more with my life and to be able to heal and all these different things. So would you say that because of these, I do have a few other questions around them, but because they're so amazing at just almost instantly healing, is that going to help a lot of the people that are struggling in this time frame, that just don't know how to heal? It's like not possible for them to maybe understand that.
So they do something called imprinting too. And so, when you come into contact with them, whether it's for a moment or longer, they can physically or energetically rather affect people in an instant, because that imprint goes into your energy field rather, and it affects your vibration in a positive way. So they have an everlasting effect on people. So it's like the more people they come in contact with all over the world, the more people start to heal. And it's not one of those things that they have to put their hands on you and say a prayer. Like, they could be an infant and they could just be in the same, a 10 or 12 foot radius as you. And you're just walking by them, in the store. And suddenly, like, the person next to them has a shift in consciousness that may not happen spontaneously, but could happen the next day or overnight or it's a slow shift. But that's how they work. So I don't know if that's what you're asking.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I think that makes sense to me, at least. And I think that's just so beautiful. And I mean, even when you come in contact with someone who does have a lovely vibration, the effect that they have on you, just any person you've come into contact with. So I can imagine how powerful these beautiful souls will be for anyone that gets to be in their presence. My other questions around them are the divine souls born to certain parents, and do they have to be at a certain level to receive those souls into their lives?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I would say a majority of the parents are already they're either very spiritual or they are on their spiritual path, and these children will be the catalyst to kind of like catapult them there. But they will only be within a family that will be able to support them in the way they need to be. They need to be supported. So they have to have some sort of spiritual foundation. And I have met many parents that are pregnant or have had these children. And I would say that there's a good mix of both. And I would say that the ones that are less spiritual tend to have like two or at least one or two other children, and this is their third. So they're kind of like are already used to being a parent, and they've kind of figured things out, and they may be newly spiritual. And then the ones that are already spiritually awake, for some reason, and I don't know why, because I never got a straight answer, they are only children and to older parents. Like, their parents are having them at like 35, but closer to 40. So they're older parents.
Yes.
I mean, I guess we could come up with a lot of assumptions as to why that is. But they're only children. So they're the only one, and the parents are older. And so that's kind of the two groups that I've noticed.
Yeah, that makes sense, I think. Yeah, definitely. And then what do you see happening after 2023? Is there another group, or does it stop there? What happens?
I have asked that question so many times, and I have not gotten a clear answer yet, because they've told me we're not ready, we're not there yet. But my assumption or my intuitive kind of thought is we will, if we truly are in the Aquarian age and we're on the cusp of 1,000 years of peace, and if these children anchor us in, then we will open up what's the word I'm saying? Because right now the wheel of reincarnation is closed. So there's no more of those souls coming in over and over with struggle and poverty and fear and all of that, right? It's not being allowed. So it's like we're auditioning for souls to now come into Earth that would truly like to have the Earth experience that was intended, eons ago, before everything went sideways. But the criteria is that they have to be evolved at a certain place in their evolutionary consciousness, or whatever you want to call it, so that they will not bring any evil or any darkness to the Earth. and they wouldn't be able to get in even if they tried, because their frequency has to be at a certain level. So it will be like starseeds coming in, but not to the extent of like the divine, because it won't be needed anymore. So it will be more of, okay, let's actually enjoy Earth how it was intended in 5D, and open it up to those that are ready to come through. So those would be the future generations after that. And I believe that we'll be living hundreds, if not longer, maybe even 1,000 years old. So we'll be living a very long time without illness, with the ability to heal ourselves. And the life just looks so different whenever I look ahead from what I can see. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I can guess. It's like a little kid at Christmas. I'm like trying to peek in the presents and see, but like my mom keeps catching me and keeps kicking me away, I don't know for sure, but that's kind of like what I'm thinking or what I'm seeing, but I don't know for sure.
Wow. That date 2023, is that like a hard end date, or is that we might see some kids maybe fall into 2024? Is it just cap off at 2023? We still might see some more of these children coming in. There's a little bit of an overflow. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no. Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, okay. Let me clarify. So divine children are only to 2023 to anchor. From what I've been told, that's the cutoff. There literally is actually a window that is opening up, like a portal for them to come through. Once that portal closes at 2020, it's a hard close date for them. But we could still have crystals, rainbows, stars, even indigos. So we could still have those categories of starseeds coming in to contribute to our continued evolution. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? But not the divine children. And perhaps something else comes later, or more hybrids come where they're a combination of different ones. They will continue to come. That's not going to stop anytime soon. But I think the call for others to come in would open up when it's, I guess, safe for that to occur.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, definitely answered that question. Well, I think we've probably kept you here for a long time, Sherri. So we'll finish up this conversation now. We just wanted to check if there was any other projects that you were working on that you wanted to share with viewers.
Yeah. Actually, I'm really excited because our second video in our Divinely Guided Children series came out today, and I would love for you to share it if you would with your audience. To give a backstory for those that may not know what I'm talking about. So I had an idea, or I wanted to collaborate with one of the teachers that I work with on creating short animated films for kids on spiritual topics to go along with the school that I'm creating, or that I'm continuing to create classes for, so that children can learn about things that they should be learning about in school, but they're not yet, at least. So we did a pilot one a couple months ago that was a couple of minutes long, and I wanted to see how people would like it. And there was so much good feedback that I kind of escalated the process of the second one, and it just came out today. And I'm working on the third and fourth. So they're only like a little over 4-minute videos, but they're animated. The characters are actually based on my children. You'll see, not the ethnicities and things, because I wanted to diversify it, but their names. And so that's really fun. But I would love to share that with your audience. The second video came out today. It's on this one. We're focusing on angels, mindfulness, and our emotions. And so I'm really excited about this whole animated short films that we're creating. And so I'd love to get feedback from your audience. So that is something new that just came out. So I'd love to share it as much as I can.
Yeah, definitely. We will definitely link that, Sherri.
Yeah.
Can people still book sessions with you online? Is that still open for people, or are you sort of closed off at the moment with too many bookings?
Yeah, I am a little overwhelmed at the moment. I think I'm booked into October of this year, and I might close my schedule off once I get through December, because I just too overwhelmed to think about next year. But I do have sessions left for this year after October. And so people can find me on intuitivewellnesscenter.com to have sessions for either themselves or for children. So I do both. And so there are some left. Yeah.
And you also have a YouTube channel as well, Sherri, and that's just under your name. So Sherri Divband, right?
Yeah, that is exactly right. Yeah. And that's where the Divinely Guided Children videos are on my channel. That's where you can find them.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll leave all of those things
We'll link
below
all
as
of it
well,
below.
so the audience can get hold of that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sherri. That's
Thank
been
you,
a
Sherri.
really, really enlightening conversation. As we
Yeah.
said, many more questions we could ask you, but
We'll have to do a part 2.
we can do a
part 2. We'd love that.
Yeah, we'll do a part 2. We'll do it. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be on your platform, and you guys are lovely. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
you.
you as
Beautiful,
well.
beautiful.
Thanks so much, Sherri. We'll talk to you very soon.
Yes. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.